Okay. And make me small again. Okay, good enough. Okay, this is a Futurist New Deal podcast, and I'm here with a special guest, Lincoln Cannon, one of the directors of the Mormon Transhumanist Association, and a guy who I've been wanting to talk to for a long time. At the Futurist New Deal, I haven't been focusing so much on my feelings about spiritual issues, but I do have strong feelings on the subject. And Lincoln Cannon is a guy who I very much admire in this arena. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Lincoln, or about yourself as a Christian transhumanist.
Sure, yeah. Ben, thank you for the invitation to talk with you. I've been looking forward to this. So as a Christian and Mormon transhumanist, for me, it's very important that we bring together both the science and technology side of things with the spiritual and religious side of things. And for me, I don't find these competitive at all. I find them actually complementary. The one makes the other better, in my experience. Science and technology without the spiritual and without the religious kind of feel hollow and purposeless for me. Whereas on the other hand, a religion and spirituality without the science and technology, they kind of feel weak and superstitious even on their own. And so when I try to put the two things, or the four things, if you want to count them as four, together, then I have a better experience. I become a better person as a consequence. I think better and more clearly. I act with better results, and I find that I'm able to interact more effectively and more persuasively with more people as a consequence. So I find a lot of value in all of these domains, and pulling them together is an important thing.
That's really wonderful. Over the weekend, I spoke at an organization called People Unlimited. They had a longevity weekend and had a wonderful time there, and was able to speak a little bit, talking about how radical life extension is kind of the thing that motivates a lot of people in the techno-optimist community, and it is kind of one of, I would argue the main organizing principle of people of our backgrounds. And at that, I just yesterday, then I also spoke to Charlie Cam, and we were talking about this same idea that how super longevity is the thing that we really want. Do you have an order of importance in terms of techno-optimist goals for yourself or your organization?
Sure, yeah. So I would say that the most important thing for ensuring a positive future is that we develop a strong sense of cooperation to the point of what we would call compassion. And that if we're able to develop this communal virtue of compassion, then we'll be able to best use the technologies and the powers that come our way in ways that won't undermine our goals, that won't undermine our cohesiveness as a community, that won't lead to destruction, that won't lead to violence and oppression, but rather it will be empowering and uplifting and pro-socially building. And so I think that the brightest, most beautiful, strongest futures for humanity will be brought about as we use the power of science and technology in compassionate ways. So I'd say the most important thing that we can ever do is work to improve our relationships with each other, our compassion, our empathy with each other, our efforts to overcome difficulties with each other. And so then position ourselves to use the amazing tools that we are developing in better rather than worse ways.
That's beautiful. And a moment ago, I talked about visiting People Unlimited. I've spent a little bit of time in your area, and I haven't been to as many events as I would have liked, but I have watched an awful lot of videos and read an awful lot of content from the Mormon Transhumanist Association. And let me just say, without casting aspersion on other social organizations of the kind, that your community is at a pretty high intellectual level compared to some of these other organizations that tend to be very uplifting, but they're not producing the same kind of content that you guys are.
Thank you.
Um,
That's a kind compliment.
yes. This So how long has the Mormon Transhumanist Association been around? And tell us about your genesis and evolution.
Sure. There were 14 of us that founded the Mormon Transhumanist Association in 2006. And since that time, we've grown to consist of about, I think we're around 800 members currently. I served as the president of the association for the first 10 years, and we now have a new president. His name is Chris Bradford, and we have a new CEO. Her name is Michael Ann Bradley. And they've been leading the association now for a few years and continuing to, spread the good word. I've continued to serve as a director of the association and to advise on strategy and things along those lines. But I've been also working on kind of doing my best to transition the management and the leadership over to newer and younger and hopefully smarter and brighter and stronger and better people than myself over time. So the association, we do a lot with conferences and publications, both on the internet and in print. We have meetups on a regular basis where we get together and we discuss the intersection of technology and religion. We've had the opportunity to be in some documentaries that will be coming out actually in the next year or so. And we've received quite a bit of press attention as well over the years from publications like the New Yorker, and Medium magazine recently published a piece on us that have received really positive attention, and we've been happy with the results, and it's enabled us to make new relationships, new connections with other people, whether they're other Mormons or not. We have a great network with non-Mormon transhumanists, whether including atheists, and we have a great network with Mormons who aren't transhumanists that are interested in what we do, although they may not identify as transhumanists themselves. So we're always involved in outreach, have been for a long time, to try and help people understand what we're doing, and to the extent they're interested, persuade them to join us in the advocacy work that we do.
Very nice. And a few moments ago, you were talking about the importance of a humanist and a humanitarian emphasis in these techno-optimist undertakings and discussions. The Futurist New Deal and the JBZ 2020 campaign has been mostly focusing in a lot of ways on near-term public policy initiatives, e-governance, and economic policy reform. But it's with the mind to move the United States in a direction where we will be able to support longer lifespans and other public health goals beyond the ones. The bar is set relatively low at this time, in my opinion. And life extension is something that's very, very dear to me. But there's other issues that people in our community might be talking about. Just within the last week, Elon Musk's Neuralink company has released some new information about something that he himself has said plays an important role in a sort of advanced algorithm arms race and keeping humans in the driver's seat with respect to that. How do you think that advanced algorithms and AI, what role is there for those things in discussions with the techno-spiritualists?
Yeah, so like most Mormon transhumanists, I'm a big fan of healthy life extension, a big fan of artificial intelligence development, and particularly a big fan of how do we go about integrating human intelligence with machine intelligence so that we can not merely be spectators in the advance of technology, but that we can remain in the driver's seat, right? And we not just have our machines pass us by. So I love what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink. the announcement was cool. I wish him the very best in his development. Personally, I'm a little bit biased. One of my good friends, Brian Johnson, founded a company called Kernel, which is competing with Elon Musk. And so I'm actually, if there has to be a winner, I don't know that there has to be, but if there has to be a winner, then I'm a fan of Brian Johnson, and I hope that his company does very well. Going forward into the future, I think that the technologies that help us integrate our cognitive capacities with our machine intelligence will provide totally new ways to experience the world that we're probably not equipped to even imagine today. Some really cool things, though, do come to mind. I'm sure they'll be far transcended, assuming humanity survives long enough to do the work. But a cool example that comes to mind is, hey, maybe in the future I will be able to integrate my experience with the experience of my wife, and we can become acquainted with each other in ways that now we can only barely imagine. I mean, my wife and I, we know each other better than probably anybody else knows us. But imagine if you could see through each other's eyes, feel through each other's skin, and imagine the ways that would create new and deeper, better, more profound relationships. And those kinds of things seem like the beginning point for a real blossoming of better people, at least the potential for better people, as we get to know each other better, can feel what each other feels, and learn to empathize and hopefully build on empathy towards cooperation and compassion that's much more profound than anything we've been able to engage in prior to such developments.
Now, a few moments ago, that is a lovely thing. It's something that I've long wanted to experience, and just developments in recent years or months, including Neuralink, seem to be making that increasingly more of a near-term prospect, an exciting set of developments. A few moments ago, you mentioned the idea of existential risk. I wonder if you could clarify, do you feel that that risk is a continuation of 20th century problems, the climate crisis, things of that kind, or would you describe that as something deriving from advanced technologies?
I think that the risks that we face consist of both of the things that you mentioned, both the technologies of the 20th century, as well as new risks that are confronting us because of developments in technology. I also think we face a kind of a set of natural risks that predate human civilization, right? There's always the possibility that a meteor could strike our planet. If you look back through the geological history of Earth, there have been times when the Earth has been much hotter than it is right now. I do think that humans are contributing to global climate change, but there are also natural risks for global climate change, and we have to compete with, we have to deal with the risks in both of those areas, the natural and the artificial risks. So, as I look at the future and all of the natural and artificial risks that we face, I think it's wise that we approach it in maybe sort of a portfolio way, where we look at all of the risks, we attribute degrees of probability and degrees of magnitude for each of those risks, and then kind of do a weighted analysis of how much attention and resources we should direct at them based on those probabilities and magnitudes. And then hopefully by doing that, we'll approach them intelligently and decrease the overall risk sufficient to ensure our survival. One area where I think that we face considerably more risk than perhaps many of us have yet gotten around to imagining is in the area of artificial intelligence. I don't think that intelligence entails consciousness necessarily. I interpret intelligence in a very kind of mechanistic way. Intelligence is the ability to optimize for goal achievement across diverse situations, so far as I understand it. And I think that machines can be very intelligent in some ways that have nothing to do with the values of human consciousness. And so we could create machines that would be very destructive to everything that we hold most dear. So if we don't want to live in a future where machines do very terrible things to us and to our world, then we need to take care about how we go forward in the development of machine intelligence. And I think that integrating human intelligence with machine intelligence is an important way of mitigating that risk, because then we imbue our values into the strengths of machine intelligence.
Hmm. It's funny you mentioned that. I'm later today interviewing a novelist, Reichen Volta, who's written a book which is itself an homage to Hugo de Garis's Ardalect Wars novels, and uh, so he's kind of talking about this AI arms race, and it's not necessarily framed in terms of an AI singleton, a consciousness. I think that is also rather a red herring in these discussions. The idea of machine consciousness, a pretty big one. But the net result in sociopolitical terms, the net result of an AI singleton and the net result of dramatic income inequality in conjunction with hyper capitalist manifestations, and then someone having access to algorithms well beyond what ordinary people have, it leads to a perplexing set of potentials, including, the one of the main arguments for why we aren't able to contact other civilizations, the Fermi paradox, is that there is this kind of acceleration and opening of Pandora's box at a certain point in that trajectory of civilizations where people aren't quite able to get a handle on it, and might tend to be their undoing. And it's something, whether that's factually true, it's something we have to keep in mind as our civilization moves in that direction. It's why I think that life extension it's a safe choice. And I think that Neuralace or Kernel are safe choices in that they are maybe democratizing these things. They, by their nature, will tend to not be contributing to that income inequality set of concerns, and certainly getting people situated in their culturally or policy-wise in such a way that they are able to benefit from something like a longevity escape velocity, is to my mind it's the best of our community, and it's the best thing that we can do. Do you encounter people in your organization who are skeptical of life extension from an ideological or belief point?
Not often, no. Mormon transhumanists tend to be very hopeful about life extension. It fits very well into a Mormon vision of the future. In our religious tradition, our prophets have talked about a day when death will be vanquished and when humans will become embodied immortals. So in Mormonism, immortality is not something disembodied. It's not something supernatural. In Mormonism, immortal persons have bodies that are as tangible as the bodies that you and I have now, but they're more robust bodies. So in Mormonism, even God has body and embodiment attributed, and so as you might imagine from that, Mormons, as we imagine the future that we hope to live in and that we trust in and that we want to work toward and contribute to, we imagine that future being one where we gain these immortal embodiments, these better, more robust bodies, and that there may be ways that we can contribute to the acquisition, to the development and the attainment of such bodies through science and technology. So yeah, most Mormon transhumanists are pretty hopeful in that area.
Hmm. And it's interesting you say that, in talking about the artificial singleton concepts generally, I sometimes think that people turn to those concepts because they maybe have a tacit belief that human beings achieving those things themselves, human beings becoming the super intelligent entities, is a kind of hubris, and our traditions sometimes enforce those ideas. So they want to externalize it and make it about some other who is their sort of benefactor. Do you think, speaking of something like an omega point, is do you feel that is a better outcome for human beings? That high level of connectivity, the kind of thing that you mentioned, aspiring to with your wife, for all of humanity. Do you feel that's a better outcome, even if it takes longer than super intelligence in a sort of corporate kind of framework?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of problems with the corporate framework. I'm definitely not anti-capitalist. I think that there's a lot of value to capitalism, but there's also a lot of risks and challenges and ethical conundrums there. And yes, I do aspire to live in a integrated spiritual community. We might describe it as something like an omega point. In the Mormon tradition, we emphasize an aspect of Christian doctrine called theosis, which is the idea that humanity should become God. So hubris in the Mormon tradition is defined as trying to become God in the wrong way, not just merely trying to become God. And so we look to the Bible and we see in the Bible that there's a couple of different examples given about how we might approach godhood. On the one hand, Paul in his epistles in the New Testament writes about one would-be God that would seek to raise itself above all others and declare itself God. And Paul associates that would-be God with the name son of perdition, which of course is a negative name in the Bible. On the other hand, Paul also writes about another, and this other would try to raise us all together as joint heirs in the glory of God. And of course, Paul's talking about Christ as that other approach to godhood. So in the Mormon tradition, hubris would be any attempt to follow the trajectory of the son of perdition, where we're trying to raise ourselves above each other, versus the trajectory that Christ exemplifies, which is the attempt to raise each other together as joint heirs in that glory. So there's no hubris in that kind of godhood from a Mormon perspective, but there's a lot of hubris from the other approach to godhood.
And concepts of moving towards something like omnipotence, these are kind of relative notions. If a lot of people are being elevated to the same degree, it's a little harder, I think, for people to fearmonger about something like this. Whereas if we have one sort of runaway class of people attaining these kind of abilities, very much in keeping with what you just said. It is definitely an exciting time to be alive. Aside from AI and aside from life extension, do you have other areas in tech, maybe in nearer term matters, that are close to your heart?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I run a business named Thrivis that focuses on near-term cognitive and longevity enhancement. So we sell supplements, and those supplements are things that people can use today to make a practical difference. They're not going to turn you into a super intelligence. They're not going to make you immortal, of course, but they can make an incremental practical difference. I'm also a big fan of things like meditation, expressions of gratitude, healthy nutrition, healthy sleeping habits, good relationships, pro-social interactions. All of these things can contribute to making us happier, making us healthier, and making our communities stronger. And in that context, we can all contribute better towards the pursuit of those more distant aspirations that we have.
Mm. And many people talk about the near-term developments with social media and connectivity. I'm of a mind that these things that we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. But many people, in talking about these things, they feel that people have moved in an unhealthy direction with some of this. What would be your advice to people? You know, maybe not necessarily of the kinds of things of the Cambridge Analytica, but more on a personal level to maintain maintain their sanity in this rapidly changing world.
Yeah, this is a big deal, and I have friends and family members who have suffered because of misuse of social media and the all of the sources of social information that we have. Some of the things I like to try and keep in mind as I use social media and as I talk with friends and family about it is that people use social media to show the best parts of themselves. And so when you go on and you see all of these wonderful things, you've got to remember that these people are all dealing with stress and anxiety and depression and hunger and fear and tough relationships and bad days and being fired from work and whatever, all of the same kinds of things that you and I have to deal with from day to day. And they are all aging and dying from day to day. And they are all struggling to love their children or their partners or their parents or their friends and to build those relationships from day to day. And it doesn't always work. But when it does, they put it on Facebook, right? And so the first thing is to remember, listen, you're getting the positive snapshot of people's lives, their most beautiful pictures when you look on social media. Another thing is that when you go and you have a political or a religious or a sexual discussion on social media, you've got to remember that when you're not looking at somebody face to face, people kind of lose a little bit of their interpersonal self-checking, and they aren't as kind as they usually would be. So you got to kind of remember, listen, this person might be a total jerk right now, but I bet if I met him in person that they would probably be nicer than they're being right now. So that's another good thing to remember. And then, man, what a huge time waster social media can be. If you're going and you're checking out your wall on Facebook 5 times a day, or your Instagram feed 5 times a day, or your Twitter feed, you can't do that and live a productive and fulfilling life. You just cannot. It will completely eat away the time you have to do things. And so one of the things that I do is I go through my social media friends and I put little stars or check marks, whatever they do on the, depending on the one, of the people that are closest to me. And those are the only people that I like get notifications from. That's not because I don't care about anybody else. I do, but I can't give hours of time to everybody that I might care about in the world. So I focus on the people that are closest to me, that I want to invest in cultivating the deepest relationships with. And I give those the most. And then as things come up, like maybe somebody will comment on something I post, or maybe I'll bump into somebody on a real street, a non-virtual street, and they'll mention something on social media. I'll go check that out and I'll like that and say, hey, I'll enjoy that with them. But I really try to very carefully preserve my time so that I can work and spend time with family and my closest friends more, rather than having a broader, more superficial relationship with a gazillion people that really don't know me very well.
Mm-hmm. And I do wonder if we will also, with the advanced algorithms being able to kind of serve as proxies, I talk to my one of my main podcasting collaborators sometimes about this idea that you spoke to about this kind of level of connectivity with your wife. You can almost imagine a sense in which your personality is recreated in this virtual space, and that personality is able to do some of these connectivity things that you wouldn't be able to devote the time to. And that to me represents something that would maybe be moving us beyond this framework where social media, it's doing a lot in the broadest socio-political terms. It's doing a lot in terms of opening up a lot of new markets and avenues for people, but at the same time, it takes a toll on them personally, as you said, and we have to have defense mechanisms to be able to negotiate that. And you seem like you have a lot of a very healthy attitudes on these subjects. So let's talk about the lifestyle of the techno-optimist or the life extensionist. What would you recommend that people be doing? I'd like to also talk about clarity, the nootropic as well from Thrivus, and maybe get to that in that conversation as well.
Yeah, sure. So Since you mentioned clarity, that's one thing I'd recommend is take a look at, first of all, your nutrition in general. What do you eat from day to day? And then take a look at supplements and how supplements can actually supplement, because that's what they're for, a already healthy diet. Now, our diets, I'm a software engineer. Um, Traditionally, I worked in corporate software engineering for about 20 years, and I know that software engineers do not eat very well from day to day. I know that because I haven't always eaten well, and I still don't always eat as well as I should from day to day. And so supplements can help with that. But it is good to make an effort to try to eat a little bit better. So I'd recommend that for sure. Is eat well, eat things that are healthy for your body, and there's a lot of that is common sense. But then there's a lot of science, really, an increasing amount, a rapidly increasing amount of good science behind supplements that we can use to improve aspects of our cognition and to improve the way that we age. There's some hint of a possibility that some supplements may actually be able to extend human lifespan. We're starting to see some things in the senolytic space that are promising. But really, most of the best evidence in dietary supplements, insofar as aging is concerned now, is more about aging better rather than kind of stopping aging or reversing aging. Although I suspect those things may come soon, hopefully. So yeah, my business, our most popular product is the one you mentioned, which is Clarity Daily Nootropic. It targets improved memory, improved focus, improved mood. And then we also sell a bunch of products that target other things like helping people sleep better, helping people have better energy on demand when they need that. We have some geroprotectors that help with healthy brain function, healthy heart, joint and bone function, and also kind of metabolic and cellular parameters. So we have a bunch of products in all of these domains.
Hmm.
Moving beyond the nutrition and the supplements, I'm a big fan of the power of positive psychology in action, and that can happen in a bunch of ways. Meditation is a good way to engage in it. Prayer can be a good way to engage in it. There's different ways to pray. I highly recommend prayers of gratitude. Very, very substantial, good science behind the power of gratitude. And also talking with people that you're close to, opening up to them, being vulnerable, sharing your feelings, getting them to share their feelings with you, and working through those difficulties. That can create stronger relationships, and strong relationships will help you weather the more difficult times in life. A huge overlooked thing in the lives of many transhumanists and future-oriented persons is sleep. Something so simple as sleep. We're all working so hard on our podcasts and our books and our technology and our science, and we don't sleep well enough, and that's killing a lot of us. I know that because I haven't always slept well enough in my life, and when I don't sleep well enough, I don't think as clearly. And there's good evidence that if we don't sleep well over long periods of time, that it shortens our life considerably. So sleep better. There are things that you can eat. There are supplements that you can take to help you sleep better, but also make your room darker, make the temperature better. Go get a sleep study done if you're not, if your body is doing strange things at night that you aren't quite sure how to control, and maybe a doctor or a therapist can help you with that. Sleep is a big deal. So diet, sleep, uh, exercise. Are we exercising? If you're a transhumanist and you're not exercising, you might want to reevaluate what you're doing with your day, because exercise is one of those practical things that we can do right now to make ourselves smarter and stronger and live longer. And that's what we want, right, as transhumanists. So go out and exercise. Aerobic exercise is pretty good, but even better probably is anaerobic weight training exercise. Evidence that is going to not only improve your aerobic capacity, but also improve other parameters of your health that are really important for aging with good health is strong. There's great evidence behind this. And so if you need persuasion, go look at the science, but most of us know intuitively exercise is going to be good for us. So, those I think are the big things. On top of that, if you're open to it, and some transhumanists are more open to it than others, look for a source of spirituality in your life. There are studies that show that religious people, people that participate in communal expressions of spirituality, tend to be happier than people who are not engaged in those activities. But this can, of course, be also challenging because there's a lot of expressions of religion that strike most transhumanists as being kind of either superficial or superstitious or even outright immoral because we don't like what certain religions stand for. And I empathize with those concerns. I share many of those concerns in regards to many expressions of religion. But if you spend some time looking around, you probably can find religious communities that will be compatible with your values and that will help you take a step in the direction of living a more spiritual life. And that will pay off. It will pay off in making you happier. It will pay off and probably making you live longer, barring accidents. Spirituality really does, according to the science, contribute to making your life better. So that's another way to enhance yourself in practice today.
Mm. And what you said about sleep, I think bears repeating. Just within the last 10 years, a lot of school districts and municipalities have made a move towards allowing young people to be on a little bit later schedule in the public education, the K through 12 systems, because it's setting them up for a lifetime of misery. They're kind of on their adult parents' sleep schedules, going to bed at night, but then they're getting up at 6 a.m. They're not getting enough sleep. We're physically harming children by not they need more sleep than adults even. And
Totally agree.
it kind of in maybe in a roundabout way ties back to the things that we said about social media, where we have a lot of good things deriving from these new ways that we are in the world, and yet some of the things that we do in our kind of rat race lifestyle, they're not necessarily contributing to a longer lifespans or happier existence.
Yeah, they're really not. And think about how ironic that is, right? We spend so much time as transhumanists advocating for this beautiful future that we aspire to, and yet we aren't always making particularly smart decisions about how to get there.
I had you mentioned that you've been a software engineer for a number of years. What about just the matter of not sitting in a sort of unhealthy, uncomfortable, not ergonomic chair for 7, 8, 9 hours a day? I have a Windows mixed reality headset, which has it has some pretty good desktop integration. I can work on it now, as opposed to the VR rig that I had prior to that, which I couldn't really do that sort of thing. And so I had a standing desk and was able and I started trying to use it, and then I got rid of the standing desk and went back to my less ergonomic, just sitting in a chair like a schlub. So what do you advise for people specific to your line of work for heart health, or how do you approach that?
Well, I'm standing up right now talking to you.
Nice.
I'm at my stand-up desk. So yeah, I'm a fan of stand-up desks. Software engineers should all have stand-up desks. And at first that's really hard because it's hard to concentrate and work while standing when you're not used to it. But once you get used to it, it's the same, really. I can work for a long time. Now, I also have a chair back here, and once in a while you'll get tired, and I can push my stand-up desk down really easily. Just takes a second, just like this, right? Now you can see my chair behind me. It's that easy. But so I do that. I sit down, I take a break, and then I stand back up and I work again. I probably still don't stand up as often as I should, but I try to make a point of standing up as often as I can. Another important thing: take breaks. I'm a total hypocrite on this one, by the way. Take breaks. Go get a drink of water. Eat some healthy food. I get sucked into my work and I work for hours on end, and I practice intermittent fasting without intending to very often, and that's okay as long as I'm getting the nutrition that I need. But breaks are still important, right? You got to take some time to decompress. I'm not really great at that myself, so again, I'm being a hypocrite, but it's still important. I'm still going to say it's important because I know it is. So stand up more, take breaks, but when you're working, you might take care about the kind of environment that you have? Is it quiet enough so that you can focus on writing your code, or are people distracting you? If people are distracting you, you're not going to be as productive as you could be. So work on making the environment conducive to focus. Nootropics can help. A lot of software engineers use nootropics to improve their focus. And particularly, one of the things that I value about nootropics is they help me work harder for longer periods of time, is what I notice. When I'm using them, I'm less likely to become cranky and irritable and short-tempered and short-focused than when I am using them. And so I'm more productive when I do that. So those things all come to mind. Get some training maybe from people who can help you improve your skill set. Lots of free online courses can make you a better software engineer. That's good stuff. Maybe go get a degree if you don't have one and you feel like you need one. Those things can help, of course, too.
Very nice. And so one thing that I had wanted to talk to you about, I'm working on a mini documentary. It's mostly in the can. I'm using a few cutting in some of the stuff in the center, the middle of the story, some of these interviews. But this documentary is, in a word, it's about a sort of profound techno-spiritualist experience using virtual reality and deepfake technology to get some closure with a lost loved one, the loss of my grandfather, and creating an experience there. And I wanted to ask you if you had any advice from a spiritual perspective for moving to that closure, for dealing with that loss. And I think this is a subject that can create a lot of cognitive dissonance for people of faith and for techno-optimists of a secular mind. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, so one of the big drivers in my personal life towards the discovery of transhumanism, explicit transhumanism, because on reflection, I discovered that I had always implicitly been a transhumanist since I was a child. But my discovery of explicit transhumanism was driven in part by the death of my father. And my exploration of the possibility that science and technology could contribute to raising the dead, raising him from the dead, maybe raising me from the dead at some point in the future. And so that exploration led to things that are, of course, very hypothetical, not at all realized in present day technology, and some of it may not ever be realized. But I think that there's substantial reason for hope that we are on a technological trajectory that will enable us at some point in the future to leverage science and technology to raise the dead, to resurrect the dead. And I know that sounds super crazy to some people, but I think that if we were to sit down and look through the trajectory of where our tools are taking us and where we think they might go in the future, and if we were to be open-minded about what is preserved in the fabric of time and space, the kinds of information that we exude as persons and communities, I think that we could persuade a lot of people to be open-minded, at least, about the possibility that science and technology will give us the capacity to gather up that information again and reconstruct the brains and bodies of our loved ones and of ultimately ourselves, and have them live again in the future. So one of the things that people get very concerned about when they talk about technological resurrection is they worry that, well, maybe that person wouldn't really be my dad, or that person really wouldn't be me. But how do you know that you are you from day to day? Right? You fall asleep, you go into full anesthesia, you come out the other side. Are you still you? Did the Matrix architect swap you out while you were under full anesthesia? Did God replace your spirit while you were in full anesthesia? How do you know? You don't. What you do know is what you remember, and you have this intuitive sense of your set of characteristics and the set of characteristics of people around you that you know and love. And so there's this principle that I call the principle of psychosocial sufficiency. And all we need is what is psychosocially sufficient for us to recognize each other and to love each other and care about each other and to look at another person and say, yeah, that's my dad. Or, yeah, I am still me when I look at myself in the mirror, even after I woke up from full anesthesia. So if waking up in the morning of the resurrection is something like waking up from full anesthesia, or something like waking up from a dream, because who knows? I don't think we know nearly enough about what happens to consciousness when we die. I know most reductive thinking would say, well, it's completely gone. I think the world, the universe is more complex potentially. There are stranger things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio, as Shakespeare put it. So who knows? And I think that if we can wake up in the morning of the resurrection and recognize each other and love each other, then that is psychosocially.
And I don't want to get onto a tangent with this, but I've been curious to know about technologies like kernel as they advance or Neuralace as they advance will allow people to have a different set of interactions with their sleeping life, with their dream states. You know, I've been a lucid dreamer for a number of years, and I'm very curious to see how memory and even work product can be incorporated into those experiences in a more robust way. This mini documentary that I'm working on, it doesn't even have the level of kind of a memory that we would see in works like Black Mirror in the recreation of this television series Black Mirror and the recreation of artificial personalities towards that end, or Spike Jonze's Her, I think, is a pretty good example of that. But I hope that this mini documentary about this techno-spiritualist experience will still get people to start thinking a little more about resurrectionism as a goal, even though it doesn't truly represent that type of experience to that extent. And it is something that I think in the way that life extension in the sense, Aubrey de Grey sense, is something that we want to become as much of an organizing principle for our society as possible. The resurrectionism itself has promises of a different kind, and it might inspire people to better things in a different kind of way. And I think it's worthwhile, perhaps more controversial than the sort of SENS kind of approach, but I think worthwhile nonetheless.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I wish you the very best with your documentary. I hope you'll share it with me too when it's ready to be viewed and shared with others.
Yes, I'm looking for to be sharing that content sometime around within the next 10 days or so, sometime around the second Transhumanist Party debate.
Cool.
So it's pretty nearly beyond the rough cut stage. So yeah, thank you. Yes. Yeah, it's a kind of a big undertaking to be editing and shooting this material. A few people helping with me with it, but in the midst of also this campaign. But some of it is kind of a continuation of conversations like this are being included in it. So yes, thank you. Well, I'd like to talk about Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic universalism. It's something that I don't know, haven't been talking about too much in this campaign, but you know, for many years I went to a Unitarian Universalist service and was always fascinated by the histories of those two organizations and the merger of those two organizations. That merger does kind of represent this kind of Judeo-Christian Universalist notion. What do you see in 30 years? How do you see the religious landscapes being transformed as we are moving towards greater connectivity and different kinds of literacy and different notions of this kind? What do you see near-term strategies towards an omega point or towards a greater a greater connection between the peoples of the world?
Yeah. Yeah, so near-term trends in religion, if you look at the surveys and the data collected by the Pew Forum, which is a great surveying organization, you'll see that worldwide, we've already passed peak secularism. So on a per capita basis, religious persons are growing as a percentage of humanity. The fastest growing major religion is Islam presently, followed by Christianity. And then the other major religions tend to be kind of maintaining their numbers and percentages generally, whereas secularism is actually on the decline slightly as a percentage of humanity. So religion is going to be a big deal going forward. I think in most of the world, we're going to continue to see pretty traditional expressions of religiosity. But in Europe and the United States, we've seen that we've entered a period of time where traditional religions are having trouble, and they're getting smaller in many cases, or just barely maintaining their numbers in some cases in Europe and the United States. And some people, there used to be a lot of traction on the secularization hypothesis, which was the idea that religion was dying and being replaced with something different and secular. But because of the worldwide continuing growth of religion and other reasons, I would suggest, among them transhumanism, I would suggest that what we're actually observing is a transformation in the way we express religion. I think that we're transitioning towards what will be the beginnings of a new way to understand religion and humanity's place in the cosmos and humanity's relationship with God. And I think that transhumanist, much more emphasizingly transhumanist religions will be a dominant or at least prominent form of religion in the future. And so Christian forms of transhumanism, Buddhist forms of transhumanism, Hindu forms of transhumanism, perhaps even Islamic forms of transhumanism, I think will be strong and grow in strength going forward. What would be a productive way to encourage such a future where transhumanism and religion have a positive relationship with each other and feed off of each other to make our religions more informed of science and technology and emerging theories, and our sciences and technologies more informed of traditional values, to the extent that those traditional values are good, because not all traditions are always good, of course. Well, I think that emphasizing things like compassion and realizing that we can only ever enhance the virtues of humanity within the context of our present virtues. Emphasizing those things will help us be more likely to achieve better futures. So, I mean, for example, you'll talk to some transhumanists that will say, well, I think that we'll be able to do some kind of intervention on human brains in the future so that they'll be more likely to make ethical decisions. Well, maybe so, but who will decide to make that intervention in the first place? We can only ever make that intervention now at any given time based on the ethics that we have now. We can't just wait around for some imagined thing. We have to make that imagined thing happen. And so one of the most important things I think that transhumanists can do is a very old-fashioned thing, which is to promote compassion. Be missionaries and advocates and promoters of compassion. And so Christianity might be a good way for many of us to do that, because many of us come from Christian backgrounds. But maybe we come from other backgrounds, whether it's Buddhist or Islam or Hindu or whatever. And there are strong traditions of compassion in those religions too. So emphasize those aspects of our religion. Emphasize those. Emphasize that we need to use science and technology in compassionate ways, because all they are is knowledge and power. That's what science and technology are. And there's nothing inherently good or evil about knowledge and power. What matters is how you use them. And so we can shape our world for the better, I think, if today we as transhumanists and futurists and singularitarians and such, if we today will encourage each other to think more about how we use science and technology and advocate for them in compassionate ways.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people that I know who view a lot of religious traditions or certain institutions therein as a kind of a, a mechanism for ethno-nationalist or hyper-nationalist viewpoints. And I bring that up because a gentleman named Ted Cruz, a U.S. senator from Texas, about 2.5 years ago, the end of 2016, he hosted a hearing called "The Dawn of Artificial Intelligence." And this is a guy who I would tend to differ. Maybe you would tend to differ a lot with on certain approaches to policy matters or nationalist sentiments. But even he is kind of focusing on how to approach advanced algorithms, how to use those things in a way that benefits the people of this country. And the reason I bring this up is because I do imagine, I interviewed 3 different libertarian presidential candidates from the Libertarian Party in the last few weeks, and I am convinced that most of the things that some of the harder right libertarians want are attainable in the coming decades. My feeling is that we have to approach it in a very circumspect way so that we will be having as many people living well in the meantime, and not to put too fine a point on it, but not dying in the meantime. And I think that some of these small L libertarian right libertarian approaches might sometimes not always have that goal at heart. But I do regard myself as a left libertarian in the same way that I see those right and left libertarians having being sort of more united in a few decades from now. I see someone like Ted Cruz, being more of the kind of Christian transhumanist ally to someone like yourself in a few decades as well. Do you have feelings on building those kind of bridges and coalitions?
Yeah, the more bridges and coalitions, the better. The kind of transhumanism that inspires me most began as a bridge and coalition. We took Mormonism and we took transhumanism and we plugged them into each other and we said, what's going to happen? And so, there's something about the name Mormon Transhumanist Association that almost forces you to think. It almost forces you to pause at least a moment and say, what?
Mm.
And so when we create integrations of ideologies, it creates new mind space, new possibility space. And it creates opportunity for us to rethink and reevaluate and approach things in a new way that perhaps we had never before considered. And when we do that, good things, I think, tend to happen. It's when we silo ourselves and separate ourselves that we tend to get in these ruts and we tend to alienate each other and demonize each other and ridicule each other and separate from each other. That's when the worst things in human history, I think, have happened. That's when the genocides have happened. That's when the oppressions of slavery and the Crusades and the gulags and all of the worst, most embarrassing parts of our history have happened when we haven't integrated enough, when we haven't considered each other enough, when we haven't interacted enough to understand and empathize and have an opportunity to have compassion for each other. We never really saw each other as a full person, as a full moral agent. And so we killed each other or tortured each other, and it was horrible. So we have to change that somehow. We have to create opportunities for intellectual ins for each other. I have to open the door here that somebody can actually walk through and say, oh, I at least have something in common with this crazy Mormon. He's a transhumanist. So there's got to be at least something worth talking about with this guy. Yeah, all the Mormon stuff is crazy. Throw it out. But he's a transhumanist at least. So I can talk to him about that. And then maybe in that process of talking about transhumanism, they'll learn something about Mormonism that makes them go, oh, well, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Yeah, there's still some parts I don't like, but hey, it's not as bad as I thought. And I think that kind of thing can happen a lot as we seek to make opportunities for coalitions, as you've described them.
Mm. And a lot of people that I know who I think would describe themselves as being very progressive, they don't really allow for to the extent that I think they should for a syncretic religion. The idea that these things can evolve and that the interrelationships they want to codify those things, and that and they can make those people might be able to point to examples of situations where that that closed-mindedness was to their credit. I don't think that by and large that's true, but certainly with the Mormon Transhumanist Association is the very best of this. I do believe that, and I don't say that lightly, because I've made some study of these kinds of organizations, and I do believe that your organization is really the smartest of them, and so I thank you for what you've done in advancing techno-optimist ideas and putting it in a context that is very, very relatable, and it's an incredible step. It's an incredible step that your organization has made, and I thank you. I thank you for that.
Thank you, Ben. That's kind.
Let's see if I have one or two more notes here. I don't want to be chewing up your entire evening.
You're good.
How's the weather up there?
I think it's pretty good right now. It's actually been kind of hot, but the nice thing about heat in Utah is that we're a desert, and so when it gets hot, it's not humid. So it's pretty tolerable. And I mean, even if you go further south down into southern Utah, or even down as far as, say, Las Vegas, it can get really hot down there. But I kind of like it because, you walk out for short periods of time. I don't want to be outside all day, but for a short period of time, it's nice to go out there. It's like being in a really warm, like maybe a sauna for a few minutes, but not a humid one. And so, you don't sweat right away when it's really hot, as long as it's not humid. And so I just kind of like embrace the heat, and it feels good. And then I can go back into an air conditioned house. So Utah weather, I think on the whole, is wonderful. We have, even in the winter, we get a lot of sunlight. We get a fair amount of snow, of course, too. We have great skiing in our mountains, but it's not like it snows every day. It snows, it dumps a bunch, but then the very next day, the sun will be out bright and shiny and happy. And so we don't have the kinds of problems where, like maybe in Seattle, where it's overcast all the time. And I appreciate that. I like this light. And yeah, the weather today looks pretty nice outside, although I've been inside working all day. I'm going out a little bit later with my family. Today is actually the birthday of one of my sons, so we're going out to celebrate here in a half hour to an hour from now.
Oh, well, wish him a happy birthday from the people of the Arizona Transhumanist Party and myself as well.
Will do.
Very, very nice. Yeah, it's a little cooler here than it has been the last few weeks. We had a little, I guess you could almost call it a flash flood last night here in Phoenix. And that brought the temperature down about 15 degrees from the usual overnight temperature. But for a few weeks before, it was 115, 110 degrees every afternoon. It gets but like you said, it's the desert. If you manage to stay out of the direct sunlight, it's not as bad as you might suppose, because there's not that humidity.
It's not Florida. Heavens, that's the worst place to be in the summer, in my opinion.
Yeah. But for Miami in August, forget about it.
Yeah, that's my opinion too. I hate humidity.
Yeah. It can get pretty oppressive.
I'm a desert boy. I grew up hiking the mountains and deserts of Utah, and I love it.
Yeah. It is lovely country. I'm relatively new to this great American desert and the Western U.S. Generally.
So but you hit the national parks?
Some, yeah. I've been kind of the thing that joins our two states, Grand Canyon National Park, and so many beautiful parks in your state. Really, it's a thing to behold. Yeah. let's see if I have what what uh, what my other notes were here. Um, do you have any? Well, I already asked you that. Well, I just reached out to Micah Redding, also of the Christian
You did.
Transhumanist Association. I wanted to talk to him about this same set of techno spiritualist ideas. Um, what is your well? We talked about a kind of the idea that we expected in the course of the 20th century, some people expected this steady march of secularism, and some of those things, it's a more nuanced kind of picture in reality than that. And we talked about how there's some social conservative traditions that they may not be the healthiest minded things. Um, I said in no uncertain terms that I think that the Mormon Transhumanist Association is the best of that. How do we, in the developing world, people don't necessarily have, I'm of a mind that whenever there is a great human problem, that economics are at the heart of it, and we can point to social failings or kind of culture war notions, but I think that is generally the less direct of the causes than political or economic instability. So how do you think we advance the goals of human development and of techno spiritualism to these other? You mentioned Buddhists and Hindus, Muslims. That's an awful lot of people. Not all of the countries that are heavily represented by those groups are at that level of political and economic stability. What's the overall strategy? I know it's a big question, but
Yeah.
what do you think a strategy for we are at a point where like the PayPal mafia guys, Elon Musk, we mentioned, Peter Thiel, they have an AI safety commission based in Southern California. And that reflects these kind of concerns about advanced algorithms becoming too powerful too quickly. I don't agree with that. But the idea that serious-minded people in these communities are looking at these advances as something that could be really disrupting nation state or economic models, maybe it points to the fact also that we could be seeing real growth in the developing world on the basis of these advanced algorithms and new technologies as well, at even a faster rate than what we've seen in the last 20 or 30 years, where a lot of those mortality statistics in the developed world have really gone through the floor.
Yeah.
What do you think is a good approach to this in terms of AI safety, in terms of the best possible outcomes for the most people?
Sure. Yeah. So I think that Maslow's hierarchy is important, right? If we can't get the food that we need to eat well from day to day, if we can't get the water, the sanitation, the medical supplies that we need to live with a decent level of health, then it's pretty hard to get too concerned about living longer and healthier in the long run, right? Because we're just trying to survive today. And so I think that we need political policies in place that help encourage us to raise the worldwide level of economic opportunity. And I think we're actually, unfortunately, going through a phase right now where we're kind of working against that with a lot of, trade wars going on and such. And I think that that's, that might promote some short-term benefits for narrow geographies, but I think on the whole, over time, that hurts all of us. So anyway, my particular political inclination there aside, I think we need to find ways to improve the economic situation for everybody worldwide, and then we can work up Maslow's hierarchy from there into education. We need to improve the education of people worldwide, and then we can move up from education to the philosophies and the arts and make them scientists and doctors and whatever. There's so many things that we can do once we have the basic needs of life in place and basic education in place. Then the world becomes full of opportunity. Technology, of course, is going to help us do these things better than ever before. It already is helping us do these things better than ever before. If you look at historical trends in all of these areas that I've mentioned, we're making improvements, solid improvements worldwide. We're going in the right direction. And that makes me very hopeful and it makes me happy. But we're also not done yet. So we need to keep working hard to share the benefits of science and technology with everyone. One other area that's important in all of this is spiritual education. I don't think that we're doing a great job of handling that in Western culture right now. I think that we're creating a lot of emptiness for a lot of people, a lot of purposelessness, and I don't think that means that people don't have ethics. I don't think people have to be religious to be ethical. I think that's a silly idea. People can have ethics based on all kinds of structures of ideology. But what I think religion and spirituality are very good at is providing aesthetics, narratives that imbue our lives with purpose and that motivate us to act as a community towards visions that inspire us together. And so we need better, more beautiful, more persuasive, stronger visions and narratives, stories, true stories. They can't be false stories. They can't be bad history, but they need to be good narratives, things that inspire us and promote our hope, our trust in human potential, and our hope and trust that human potential is going to be met with a grace of opportunity from the world around us, that our efforts as humans will not be wasted. We need narratives that promote that kind of optimism and hope and intelligence, approaching these things in smart ways. And we're not always doing a great job of that in Western culture. And so, if we go out and we try to export our science and technology and dollars and economic sensibilities to the rest of the world carelessly, then we become engaged in what some people have called, kind of a new form of colonialism or an ongoing form of colonialism, imperialism. And that's not a merely good thing to exploiting everything we've got, because not everything we have is good. And there's innumerable goods and values in the cultures around us that we can benefit from and that we can learn from and that can make us better people and make our future richer and better. And so we have to strike some kind of balance in all of this. We need to give and take, give and receive, allow them to give. Take maybe the wrong word, receive would be the better word. And so we need to learn how to do that better. And that gets back to compassion again. That gets back to rethinking some of our spiritual approaches to life and learning from others' spiritual approaches to life, because there are amazingly profound spiritual thinkers in, say, for example, India. And it doesn't require a high degree of technology for them to have received from their spiritual tradition a great deal of wisdom that many of us still lack and that we can still learn from, no matter how good we are at science or technology. And so, there are things to learn and things to receive and ways to grow in virtue that will help us use our science and technology better. Because I don't think these are a competition. I don't think it's one or the other. I think they complement each other and should complement each other. So we need to create opportunities for that. Maybe this gets back to the coalition building, the bridge building, the integration building. How can we create opportunities for us to learn better from each other instead of just kind of like shoving our ideas down each other's throats all the time and just making enemies in the process?
And I think that that's an important point that maybe bears repeating. And it's an internal logic that is sometimes lost on people. The hardline religious literalists, maybe have this that idea that you alluded to, that there's a void in a human being, for not having this they're very sometimes narrowly defined idea of spirituality. But the religious moderates and people who are more progressive, as you are on this subject, would view it more as this organizing principle, this thing that moves us forward, rather than some arbitrary line in the sand. And that's a far more productive, and building a bigger tent, getting people, giving people what they need, not taking something away from them, in terms of maybe limiting what they can do or who they are in the world. And that is again why I have long admired the writings from your organization. And your organization is not only written on the Christian or Judeo-Christian traditions. You've written articles, and people in your organization have written articles about the very questions that we're talking about. These universalist notions and techno-progressive notions generally, and how we get from where we are to this better, brighter future.
Yeah, for sure. I don't imagine that everybody will someday be a Mormon. That's not going to happen. And I wouldn't even want to live in a world where everybody's a Mormon. I want to live in a world where heavens are as diverse as humans are, and that we have integrations between those heavens and can go back and forth between them and learn from those heavens, and that those heavens are, to use an expression from Mormon scripture, worlds without end. And that inspires me a great deal. And I really don't value or buy into the sectarian notion that there's one right creed for everybody for all eternity. I think much rather that what we should be seeking to construct is a complex heaven where people receive that which they're willing to receive, and they're graced with that which they are willing to work with and on, and construct together, or construct separately for a time and then reconstruct together. That sort of dynamic effort at building a complex heaven, or complex heavens plural, inspires me a great deal more. There's the tradition of that people have called the perennial philosophy, or Joseph Campbell maybe called it the monomyth, this idea that there are strains of thought that work their ways through all of our spiritualities and all of our religions that kind of tie them together, but they're also always evolving beyond themselves. And I think that we haven't even come close to the end of religious evolution. I think that, to frame it in terms of Christian prophecy, in Christian prophecy, there's this idea that the kingdom of God on earth will someday meet the kingdom of heaven and be subsumed into it. So, the religions of earth are only a starting point. There's something greater and bigger and more beautiful yet ahead of us that we should be looking forward to, and never thinking what we have now to be sufficient.
Yes. Yeah. And you mentioned the historicity of some of this. There's an argument to be made that that the religious literalism and those sectarian ideas, they did advance some kind of goals of the society in a certain framework, but in the world of that was ascendant in the 1800s of mass media, and now today a different, very different animal, a new sphere, a connectivity far beyond those early iterations of media. It's for people to have those sectarian goals, for people to have an idea that people in other religious traditions might have, that that one day all people will be a religious literalist of my kind. um, yeah, it reflects almost no real understanding or sympathy to the world that we live in the 21st century. I mean, and just in the way that we were saying that those two ideas, this personal void versus it as an organizing principle, the role of spirituality, the organizing principle is a more productive approach. The moving us forward and using these things and finding new answers to grand social problems as a society is the better way of thinking about it. And people, even the people I know who are on the hard left, often they have a blind spot about this with respect to the preservation and respect for religious traditions. Not every single, those traditions are not uniformly helpful in a 21st century context. We have to be able to criticize
and not all religions are equal. I wouldn't suggest that. I'm definitely in favor of finding what's valuable in all of the religions that are out there, but we also have to be willing to be critical, right? I'm not suggesting that we be merely a Pollyanna about everything. Everything is bright and beautiful all the time, because that's simply not true. There are bad things that happen. Religion is a super powerful social organizing force, the most powerful in human history. And power, though, is not good or evil. It's just power. So it can be used for good or evil, and it has been used for both. And so as we evaluate the religions, I think we need to evaluate them critically and try to discern what is going to be life affirming and relationship affirming and earth affirming and future potential affirming. What is going to help us blossom into our greatest potential of our most beautiful virtues? But we also need to have some humility and compassion about defining what those are, because we can make mistakes. We can be too narrow-minded, and sometimes we can overlook a virtue because we're just simply bigoted against something. And so there's a lot of complexity in evaluating this, and it takes time and interaction, and it's not a simple thing, but very much worth doing, I think.
Yes, and I don't think we even have to even be terribly critical of these institutions. People do take this sort of thing personally, even if you're not trying to make it about them. But we can be talking about the ways in which these institutions could be better in terms of not hindering a post-nationalist sort of move, or not hindering human development, not hindering better outcomes for real people. As you said, religion has had a sort of primacy in history, and that primacy can still be used for good or for ill. And the conversations that I think we should be having should not be about whether people should or shouldn't embrace a certain tenet of faith, but rather the effects and the sort of socio-political implications of some such hardline position, how it relates to various forms of nationalism and so forth. I think that that's an area that I wish people, on the left, would sometimes be able to articulate a little bit better. As I've said, we talked about. You talked a little bit about ideas of economic isolationism just a few minutes ago, and it's something that I have a kind of chasm for me between the idea of economic isolationism, those tariff type policies that are not. There's a lot of studies suggest that economic isolationist policies will tend to backfire. And certainly in the world that we live in today, of approaching a post where there are post-industrial nation states and approaching even full automation, encroaching towards full automation, we can very easily harm those things that we want to see be advanced by these kind of tariffs and these kind of economic isolationist approaches. On the other hand, Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, has said this quite well, that the United States has wasted trillions of dollars on militarist and imperialist efforts of another kind. And so this kind of isolationism, I think, in terms of militarization is something that we must be able to move towards. And there's a lot of things I would criticize in this administration. This administration hasn't been the least isolationist of in terms of militarizing. And so some of that's a concession to this new sphere that we live in. The second that the president starts making noise, John Bolton is pressuring him to invade Iran. Tens of millions of people are on their Twitter feeds saying that's really not something I want to see. And he's very receptive. He's very responsive to people's to backlashes of this kind on Twitter. But it's something that's particular to the futurist New Deal is those economic reforms and those e-governance reforms that move us closer to direct democracy. All of these things are in service to human development. And just as we have to be careful not to having the opposite effect of what we want with the isolation of an economic kind, we have to, in everything that we're doing, I believe, be trying to move towards human development and setting a stage for a not just a longevity escape velocity, but a universal longevity escape velocity. When we get to that point, which is not so far away, where we're able to be able to be monitoring everyone's health in real time, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We are then able to be providing for pennies on the dollar the kind of healthcare that's not just beyond what we have today, but able to maintain a person's health, having negligible senescence, essentially allowing people to live as long as they might choose to. And that I don't think that we're so far away from that. But it was like you were saying earlier on that Maslow's hierarchy description. There's a lot of areas in which not just the developing world, but we in the United States are not quite there. And that was the genesis of the policies of the Futurist New Deal, is to be moving us in that direction. And it's something we need to do. We're seeing, we do have these Moore's law and other exponential growth effects that we have to consider. We could really end up pretty far behind where we need to be as a society, and end up having orphan technologies, things that we're not utilizing. This has happened in the past. Things that we're not utilizing because our society and our public policy is not advanced enough to make use of them. And so we're basically turning down the greatest gift in history, this super longevity gift. To me, it's something that's very close to my heart.
Yeah, agreed. We're seeing the birthing pains of emerging technologies in several domains, where policy and governance on the one hand are trying to grapple with how best to manage it, or whether they even want to manage it, versus people that want a development. I think, you mentioned one is some of the efforts at a healthy life extension. There was a time when people didn't want to do any science, and then you couldn't get any money to work on aging, the problem of aging. Everybody just wanted to work on, diseases, or it depends on I guess whether you think aging qualifies as a disease. But nobody really wanted to spend money on aging because they FDA didn't categorize it right for certain kinds of investments or whatever. But we're starting to see a little bit of a shift there, and it's positive, I think, and it will continue to be. There'll be tensions, and we'll work through them. Another area where we're seeing tensions between regulation and development of technology is in the blockchain right now, cryptocurrencies and such, where our governments and our regulatory bodies are having trouble wrapping their heads around what it's possible to do with it, why it would be valuable, and there's lots of fear, and maybe some of that fear is justified to some extent. We can't just throw all caution to the wind in developing technologies. We have to be reasonable and critical along the way, but we also don't want to just kind of retrench into Ludditism about it either. So, these tensions are very real, and in some ways maybe slowing down some important advances. Hopefully, most of the time, they're merely manifesting as reasonable caution, but at the same time, because different people have different amounts of knowledge in different areas and we don't all know everything, one person's going to think we're going too fast in an area, another person's going to think that we're going too slow, and the truth might be something altogether other than what those two people think.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned blockchain. Many people, maybe low information news consumers, might automatically assume that we're only talking about cryptocurrencies, that we're only talking about this sort of thing, but the implications are quite vast. On Sunday, our campaign published a series of articles in the form of a longer pamphlet about the Futurist New Deal. And one part of that was talking about blockchain voting and iVoting in Estonia, the one country that has embraced this to a higher degree. Almost every nation has not just some kind of electronic voting, but has had at least a few municipalities that have done full e-voting. But nearly every developed nation. But Estonia is kind of head and shoulders above that. They have a full blockchain voting system, and it works very well. They're not being hacked by hackers in Nigeria or Macedonia. They're not falling prey to nation state shenanigans of a larger kind. The small hacks that they have experienced, they're able to deal with them. And they have a kind of two-factor system wherein they vote, basically would be voting from a desktop. About 40% of voters are doing this, voting from a desktop, and then they're able to confirm their vote from their smartphone, and that makes it extremely hard for anyone to hack. Someone could conceivably hack one person. It makes it extremely hard for anyone to have a real impact on the outcome of an election. When you have those safeguards built into it, and people in the United States, they're talking about using paper ballots again. Some people have moved in this direction in certain jurisdictions, but to my way of thinking, maybe it's a necessary stopgap for some situations, but to my way of thinking, it's like a horse and buggy owner, saying that they could never make use of the automobile. They couldn't see what we really need to be moving as much in that direction, and keeping an open mind about the ways that that this technology can streamline things, incredibly streamline things, and allow for just allow for a new ways of doing things and new forms. We've never really had a direct democracy in any nation state, and the fact that we now have countries that are able to do this, even to the degree that they are, it's an incredible thing.
Yeah,
and
I think that technology is going to enable new forms of governance that were not practically possible in human history. We've had lots of idealism in human history, and we've tried to pursue those ideals to various extents. And many of those ideals and many of those efforts at ideals have failed miserably, but not always because the ideas were like completely bad when judged by merely the ideology and the hope, but mostly they failed because they're just so impractical given the tools of the day. And so there may be totally new ways, new forms of governance that technology will open up to us that are going to be worth experimenting with and may enable us to advance in ways that we haven't given sufficient imagination to.
Device now. I'm going to only be recording audio, so. But you were talking about the idealism as it relates to forms of governance.
Yes. Yeah. So I was just saying that idealism has often gotten in the way of people. So people they've gotten very idealistic about a form of governance that they have imagined, and when it failed, they have jumped to the conclusion that their speculations and hypotheses and imaginings and their dreams were a total waste of time, when in reality it was that they may have just been way ahead of their time. They may just not have had the tools necessary to implement the form of governance that they had imagined. So I anticipate that there are many forms of governance that will prove feasible and practical in the future thanks to new tools that have just not been available historically.
And I'm looking, this is a meme and a concept that's been around for quite some time, but I'm looking at an article from last month in The Atlantic saying, calling for a fully automated luxury communism. And you're familiar, we're pretty familiar with this concept. I kind of resisted using the term communism to describe this, but the ideas behind it are quite sound. Full automation and a different, a more humanist kind of approach to lifestyles, well beyond what we experience now in the even in the finest of development, the developing world. How do you feel? What's your feeling about this? Are these guys just talking some silliness, or is this full automation idea something that we should be supporting?
Well, I guess full automation often implies that humans will no longer be an important part of the process. And I think that's a kind of a mistake, especially when it comes to governance. But I also think that as we enhance ourselves and merge human and machine intelligence, that humans will be able to be part of the process in ways and with efficiencies and magnitudes of efficacy that we have only historically associated with automation. So it would be, in a sense, it would have kind of the scalable power of automation without actually being automation in the sense of removing consciousness and human volition and participation from the equation.
And you mentioned it in a political context, which is interesting because Zoltan Istvan, the founder of our party and the 2016 candidate, also wrote a few articles around that time about the notions of algocracy specifically, or the idea that a sort of a robot or advanced algorithm could become the main organizing principle within the nation state, sort of robot for president, in a word. And I have a lot of fascination with these ideas of a more fully automated technocracy, but at the same time, it's something that fills people with terror. The idea of even not removing humans from the loop, but just having the other kinds of institutions in that loop, it's upsetting to people. And I think that is kind of a legitimate criticism of this full automation kind of state as well.
Yeah, agreed. I think that the word automation is not quite right. What we want is we want better tools to involve ourselves, our community, more broadly and more profoundly in the governance process. I think we want to continue to decentralize power. We want to decentralize knowledge. We want to decentralize authority. But the only way we can do that and still remain effective and cohesive is through better tools.
Yes. Well, this has been an incredible talk. Thank you for your many insights into the world of technofuturism, and also the insights that you gave on a more personal level about this kind of closure that I'm looking for. Your work with the Mormon Transhumanist Association, it's groundbreaking in being able to elevate a discussion for life extension and for other things that transhumanists want in a way that not too many other people have been able to do, and so I thank you for that. It was really nice to sit down and speak with you, Lincoln Cannon. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a great opportunity for me and a pleasure as well.
Yes. All right. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy the birthday party.
Thank you very much.